Today we're talking about the most important topic of any build. Let's get right to it. Welcome back. This is part 2 of the C10 build series. I'm Jim Murphy. This channel is You Break It, You Fix It. Today we're talking about getting started with a project vehicle. Now I can almost guarantee that this video will be the least watched of the series, and yet it is the most important. Do not skip this video. Watch through it if your success of any of your projects depends on it. When you watch a build series on a TV show or even some other YouTube channels, they jump right in and start thrashing on the vehicle. That's great for motivation, that's great for self-esteem, but when you start to lose that motivation at the end of a project, you need something to fall back on. Today we're going to talk about the pillars in which to start your project and how I'm starting this one. Now the very first thing when it comes to any project, no matter what you're doing, is setting expectations. I'm an expectations guy in relationships and projects. Whatever I'm doing, I'm setting an expectation from day one. And if you fail to set expectations, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. A lot of people buy project vehicles, get all excited about them, and they're gonna do all this crazy stuff to it, and they don't realize how much parts cost or how much paint costs, and they get unmotivated, or worse, they spend all of their money and they still don't finish the project, and it's just sunk money into something that's never going to get finished. So before you even start the project, set your expectation with it. Maybe you might not be doing what we're doing with this. We're doing full paint on this thing. We're going to be lowering it, doing a lot of mechanical stuff. You might say, hey, I just want to get this thing running and I want to drive it in the summertime. I don't want to do anything else with it. And that's what my uncle did with this truck for years. He just wanted to drive it. That's all he wanted to do with it. And that's great. But setting the expectation from the beginning keeps you from being disappointed with the project when you're done with it. If you had always been a dreamer with the project, like you're gonna, make it 1,000 horsepower and slam it to the ground and do a fresh paint, and you never end up doing that, you're gonna feel like you failed yourself. So from day one, set the expectation with your project. And that leads us right into our next point, and that's planning. Now you have your expectation. You know what you expect out of the project. You know what you want out of it. Now let's plan. Let's put some things in writing. Let's look at parts pricing. Let's look at labor pricing if you have to pay other people to do parts of this job. And you want to build a complete parts list and complete budget. That way you know what you're working for. You don't want to be surprised by a $10,000 part or a $2,500 part halfway through the build, and it puts the build on hold for years. It's just not fun, and it kills the motivation, and I've seen a lot of projects get sold and go down the road that way because people just didn't plan ahead. So closing out, planning, this truck has been just sitting, not doing anything for months because my buddy Mike and I have been planning what the heck we're gonna do with this thing in detail. I don't want to tear into this thing, get it all ripped down, and then we decide, oh, you know what? Let's go this different direction where I've already cut sheet metal and welded something that needs to come back out. Done that before. Or we end up using and abusing and cutting off a part that we want to reuse. And also in the planning stage, you want to take a collective evaluation of the entire vehicle, no matter what you're doing. If you just want to touch the mechanical side of it, it's still good to really look at the body side too, because maybe you can just do simple stuff to make it a little bit better and more fun to use and drive, like pins and bushings in the door, things like that. Now, before I get started on this, I'll go through and I'll mark all the imperfections in the body all over the place. Again, with a big project, you can get tunnel vision and overlook a lot of that stuff. So I want to have a good idea in the body, how much work is ahead of me with that. I'm going to look at mechanical stuff. A lot of the mechanical stuff on this is going out the window anyways. So there's areas where I'm not going to go super in depth with that, but I am going to do a preliminary evaluation of them. Another big topic that needs to be talked about when you're at the beginning of a project is storage. Now, I, by nature, am not organized at all. But when it comes to my project vehicles, that's probably the most organized aspect of my entire life. You can ask Mrs. Fix-It yourself. And I have a few storage tips for people like me out there that are just not organized. You don't like it, you hate it, but I have seen customer vehicles come in just because someone mixed up a bunch of the bolts and they had to bring the vehicle to a professional to have it reassembled. I was always the puzzle guy that had to figure out where all the bolts go. I got really good at it and realized I don't want to do this with my own vehicles. This really sucks. So my main secret weapon for storage, and this comes from years and years and years of trials and tribulations with other storage methods, are these little compartment cubbies. This is an amazing tool for storing hardware and even small parts for your project vehicle. Here's a quick example of how to use the storage bin. Taking the hardware out. Looks like someone already clipped the wires for me. That's nice. So you can see these are awesome because the compartments are so big that even this side marker light, we're not keeping these, but can go right in one bin. Put the bolts in there, lock it. Now I'll take a piece of masking tape and label this Markolite and hardware, and I always know where it is. Goes right back on the shelf. Take this, it's nice and organized. It's not gonna get crushed, it's not gonna get ripped. That's the problem with Ziploc bags. Most project cars sit around for years, and those bags get thrown on the floor, they get lost, they roll under stuff. Again, going back to customer vehicles, we had some where they lost hundreds of dollars worth of hardware. Hundreds of dollars they could have used into paying for labor, they could have used to putting cool stuff on it. And it's really silly to not just throw them in something like this, keep them nice and labeled, and that way when you're going to fit up parts for paint or whatever you're doing, you just grab this, open it, fit the parts, put the bolts right back in, they're already labeled, set it on the shelf. Now, one last thing I'll say on storage, the nice thing about working on a truck as a project, I love to put my spare parts, new parts in the beds of the trucks. It's always going to be in a spot where you can find it. Again, be careful where you stack things. Or I have a very large bench that I'll stage stuff up on back there. I try to keep my benches clean though, because the whole point in having a bench is to use a bench, and my heater's kicking on, so I'll talk fast. And another overlooked category is prep. Prepping means a lot of things. For me, it means getting my shop cleaned out. I had a couple other projects in here I wanted to finish up. I always try to finish a project before I start a new one. I like to work on one at a time. That way I don't get parts mixed and matched and confused. And another thing in the prepping that I strongly recommend is to pre-lube all the hardware that you think you're gonna touch. I put this shit on everything, but I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna pre-lube all of the bolts that I think I'm gonna touch. Now I kind of do it in stages where I know my first part of this project will be aligning the sheet metal, aligning the body panels, and lowering the rear end. So I'm gonna focus on just pre-lubing those bolts. That way I don't have just a massive PB blaster pre-lube all over the place. And the last category, if you've been around here for a while and watched a lot of my videos, you know exactly what it's gonna be, and that is check in your parts. Before, again, preliminary stages of planning, we ordered a ton of parts before I even pulled this truck inside. That way, once I get started, I don't have to stop, and if I run into hiccups with a certain area, I can bounce around on the truck, and that's the way we ordered the parts. Is that way I always have something to do. I have a wife and 2 little kids at home. I have very little time to be in the shop. When I'm here, it needs to be productive. And one of the ways to avoid headaches and hiccups and returning parts and surprises, all of those things we hate, is to check in your parts. And as I've mentioned in many other videos, the beauty of checking in your parts is you get an idea of the procedure you need, the procedure it takes to take the parts off and replace them. If you look where all the bolts and the mounting surfaces are, you have a really good idea of the tools needed to take it apart, the size of the hardware, where you need to spray penetrating lube, and what parts you might need to remove to get to those parts. So it's always good practice no matter what you're working on, just check in your parts, take them out of the box, and especially if you have to return something. So before you start anything, always check in the parts. I'm gonna wrap this video up here. I don't like to talk at you that much, but this, make no mistake, is the most important video of this entire series. We're gonna be doing a lot of stuff. We're gonna be lowering the truck, shaving a bunch of the old goofy stuff off of it, full repaint. There's just a mile-long list of things we're doing, and that's why this video is so important. That's why planning, prepping, or organizing, storage, all those things are so important. They're gonna set you up for success with your project, and you're gonna be happy that you implemented what you learned in this video. Be sure to stick around for the build. As always, I'm Jim Murphy. This is You Break It, You Fix It. You can follow me between videos on Instagram at You Break It, You Fix It, and I'll see you in the next video. It was just one thin strip cut out of it, and slam bam, thank you Fender, and we were done.